They weren't supposed to find it. The storm had torn half the hillside away, roots sticking out like broken fingers, and behind the wet clay, there's something that shouldn't have been there. Metal. A square door, old, bolted, its paint eaten down to gray. This wasn't a hunter's hideout. It wasn't a well. It was a door. If you're watching this, don't scroll. What's underneath that door is something you have to see to believe. And if you respect the men who served and then disappeared into silence, hit like, subscribe, and stay till the end. Some stories deserve to be heard. The news spread the way small town rumors do, fast and crooked. 3 kids from Madison County went hiking after the storm and found a bunker in the woods. By the time Eli Turner heard about it, photos were already online. A chunk of red clay hill ripped open by rain, and in it, a hatch with a steel handle, the kind that looked military. Eli wasn't much of a reporter. 27, freelance, still paying off a journalism degree that got him nowhere. He lived in his aunt's spare room, wrote about county fairs and missing pets, and dreamed of something that mattered. This could be it. He drove out before noon in his dented Toyota, past the last gas station and onto the dirt road that led toward the hills. The world smelled like wet pine and mud. Branches drooped heavy from the rain, brushing against his windshield. At one point, the tires started slipping, so he parked and walked the rest of the way. The slope was steeper than he expected. The mud gave under his boots. He saw it before he reached it. The metal rectangle half buried in the dirt, with a faint line of rust cutting across it like an old scar. Up close, it was about 3 feet wide, solid iron, bolted on one side. Not government issue, not entirely homemade either. It had weight, intent. Someone built this to last. There were footprints, recent ones, sneakers, cigarette butts, a soda can, teenagers probably. But no one had gotten inside. The door was still shut tight, sealed at the edges by dried mud. Eli crouched, brushing dirt away. The handle was thick, ship-grade steel. Beside it, an air pipe stuck out of the ground. Ventilation. Rusted but not collapsed, which meant there was space beneath. He pulled his phone, took a few pictures. The story was already writing itself in his head. Storm uncovers hidden bunker, secrets beneath Madison County hills. It sounded good, clickable, but standing there, he felt something else, an unease. This didn't look like some Cold War relic buried for fun. It looked like someone had lived down there. He pressed his ear to the metal. Nothing. No hum, no echo, no sound at all. Just his own breath. He hesitated. Then he went back to the car and returned with a crowbar. The first pull didn't move it. The second did. A grinding groan of metal on metal. Then a crack, like a sigh escaping from underground. A smell rose up. Not rot, not decay. Oil, tobacco, dust. The smell of something old but tended to. Something alive once. He pried the hatch open a few more inches. Beneath it, a ladder dropped into darkness. Not concrete, not wood. Steel steps. At the bottom, faint light. Eli's chest tightened. If there was light, there was power. And if there was power, maybe there was still someone down there. He knelt, shining his phone's flashlight into the opening. The beam caught metal walls, a workbench, shelves stacked with jars, cans, books. It wasn't a bunker, it was a home. He swallowed hard. The air rising from below was warm, not cold. There was a low hum, maybe from a generator. He should have called the sheriff, or at least someone. But his pulse said otherwise. Stories like this didn't happen twice. He climbed down, one step, then another. The metal clanged softly under his boots, echoing through the narrow shaft. When he reached the bottom, the smell hit him full. Diesel, coffee, damp earth, a faint trace of cigarette smoke. He turned the light around. The room opened wider than he'd imagined, 15, maybe 20 feet across. A cot in the corner, a stove built from scrap metal, a small table perfectly arranged. On the wall, hanging above a folded wool blanket, was an American flag, faded but clean. He raised his phone higher, recording. "Jesus," he whispered. Next to the cot sat a wooden crate filled with notebooks, each labeled with dates going back decades, 1983, 1991, 2004. And then he saw it, lying neatly on the table as if waiting for him, a pair of dog tags. He picked them up, brushing off the dust. The metal was cold, etched deep. R. Holloway, Raymond L., U.S. Army, Vietnam, blood, type O+. Eli froze. This wasn't some random hermit. This was a soldier. Someone who'd gone down and never come back up. He turned slowly, scanning the shadows. There were photos on the wall, black and white, curled at the edges. A man in uniform. Jungle in the background. Another photo. Same man, older, beard grayer, sitting beside a radio transmitter. And in the far corner, half hidden under a tarp, was the source of the hum. A generator, still running. Someone had been here, recently. Eli's heart hammered. He backed toward the ladder, his breath fogging in the cold air. Then, from behind him, from somewhere deeper in the dark, came a slow, deliberate sound. A match struck. A brief flame bloomed, and for a split second, Eli saw him. An old man, thin but steady, eyes reflecting the firelight. The voice that followed was calm, rough like gravel. "You shouldn't be down here." Eli froze. The sound of his own breathing felt deafening. The match's glow trembled for a moment before the old man used it to light a lantern. The room filled with a weak amber glow, washing the metal walls in flickering warmth. The man looked older than time itself. His beard was a scruff of silver and white, his face carved with deep, sun-creased lines. He wore an army jacket patched at the elbows and a flannel shirt beneath it. His eyes, though clouded around the edges, were sharp. For a second, neither spoke. Only the low hum of the generator filled the silence. "Who are you?" the old man asked finally, voice steady, almost tired. Eli swallowed. "My name's Eli Turner. I'm with the Madison County Record. I saw the door after the storm. I thought this place was abandoned." The man stared for a long moment, then gave a faint, humorless smile. "You thought wrong." He turned, moving with slow, deliberate motions, and set the lantern on the table beside the dog tags. Eli realized his camera was still recording, the tiny red light blinking. The old man's gaze flicked toward it once, and without a word, he reached out and turned it off. "No photos, no recordings," he said. "You can look, but you don't take anything out of here. Understood?" Eli nodded. "Yes, sir." The man nodded back, as if testing him. Then he walked toward a small wood stove in the corner. It looked handmade, welded from scrap metal, but it was functional. He opened it, added a piece of dry wood, and the fire inside crackled awake. "Sit," the man said. Eli hesitated, then sat on an overturned crate. He looked around, taking in the space now that the light revealed it properly. It wasn't a bunker, it was a home. There were bookshelves built into the dirt walls, lined with old manuals, classic novels, and military field guides. A cot, neatly made with a wool blanket. A table with a tin cup and a half-empty jar of instant coffee. On the far wall hung photographs. A young man in uniform beside a helicopter, another with a woman smiling faintly, her arm around his waist, and another, taken much later, where he sat beside a radio set surrounded by wires. "You live down here?" Eli asked softly. The old man, Ray Holloway, nodded once. 48 years. Eli blinked. Since Vietnam? Since I came home from it, Ray said, poking the fire with an iron rod. Didn't see much point in coming all the way back if I couldn't find quiet. The way he said it made Eli's chest tighten. The silence stretched again, filled only by the crackle of wood and the faint hum of the generator. "People thought you were dead," Eli said. "There's a file at the courthouse. Raymond Holloway, declared missing since 1973. Ray gave a faint shrug. "Not wrong." Eli tried to piece his thoughts together. "You built all this yourself?" "Piece by piece," Ray said. "Started with a hole and a shovel. The rest followed." He leaned back on the stool, the lantern light glinting off the lines of his face. "You dig long enough, the world forgets about you, and that's a good thing." Eli looked around again, noticing details he'd missed. A set of polished tools, labeled and hung neatly, cans of preserved food dated by year, a folded U.S. flag resting under glass. Everything here had purpose, order. "Why stay?" Eli asked finally. "Why not come back up?" Ray's eyes shifted to him, and for a second Eli felt the weight of decades behind that stare. "Up there," Ray said, nodding toward the ceiling. "It's never quiet. Noise everywhere. People talk too much. Forget how to listen. Down here it's quiet enough to think." He poured water into a dented pot, set it on the stove, and turned back to Eli. "You want coffee?" Eli hesitated. "Sure." Ray filled 2 tin cups, handed one over. The taste was bitter, heavy with earth, but it warmed his chest. "You ever fight?" Ray asked suddenly. Eli shook his head. "No, sir." "Then you wouldn't understand the quiet," Ray said simply. "It's not peace. It's something else. You spend enough nights listening to gunfire, and silence starts to sound like mercy." Eli stared at the old man, unsure what to say. He felt the strange gravity of the place, the air thick with history, the smell of metal and time. "What about all this?" he said finally, gesturing at the walls of books and old electronics. "You built a whole life down here." Ray smiled faintly. "Not for me." Eli frowned. "Then for who?" The old man didn't answer. He stood, walked over to the far wall, and pulled back a heavy curtain Eli hadn't noticed before. Behind it was another door, smaller, steel, covered in wires and switches. A faint red light blinked above it. Ray looked back at him. "You wanted a story, son?" he said quietly. "It's behind this door." He rested his hand on the handle, then paused. His voice dropped lower, rougher. "But once you see it, you don't unsee it." The lantern flickered, shadows breathing along the walls. Eli felt his pulse in his throat, the air thick, heavy with diesel and dust and something else, something human, something sacred. Ray opened the door. A cold draft rolled out, carrying the faint buzz of static. Rows of old radio equipment filled the room. Transmitters, dials, wires, and headsets, all patched and soldered together over decades. On the wall, dozens of index cards were pinned in rows, each marked with a date, a name, and a number frequency. And on the desk, beside a cracked microphone, lay a notebook. Its cover read, "Night Watch, Broadcast Log, since 1974. Eli stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "What is this?" Ray's answer was simple, something that kept a lot of men alive. Eli didn't move. His flashlight beam drifted over the radios, over the tangled wires and patched together circuits, the solder joints gleaming like veins of metal. There were at least 6 transceivers, all from different decades. Some look military grade, others homemade, the kind of machines built by someone who understood how to make the impossible work. A low hiss filled the room, static from a speaker that had been left on. Every few seconds it cracked, whispered like breath against a microphone. Ray reached over and turned a dial. The static shifted, became a hum. "Still running," he murmured. After all these years, Eli stepped closer, scanning the index cards pinned on the wall. Each one was handwritten in small, tidy letters. June 5th, 1981. Buddy from Ohio, still hearing the choppers. Sept 14, 1997. Marine out of San Diego, says the pills don't help. Jan 3, 2006. Caller from Maine, lost his brother last winter. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. He looked back at Ray. "What were you doing? Talking to them?" Ray nodded. "Listening mostly, talking when they needed it." "You were like a therapist?" The old man smiled faintly. "I'm no doctor, son. Just a man with a signal and a reason to stay awake." He lowered himself into a chair by the desk, moving slowly, joints cracking. The lantern light softened his face. Less shadow, more story. "When I came back," Ray began, "the world had moved on. The parade stopped. The flags went back in their boxes. People said thank you, but they didn't want to hear what we saw. The noise didn't stop when the shooting did. It just changed." He looked at his hands, nodded, burned, steady. "So I built something that could reach where I couldn't go. A voice in the dark. A place for men like me. The ones who couldn't come home even after they came home." Eli's throat tightened. "You mean veterans?" "Not just veterans," Ray said. "Ghosts, living ones. They call in, they don't give names. I listen. Sometimes I talk back. Sometimes that's enough." He gestured toward a faded photograph pinned near the desk. A group of soldiers, muddy, smiling, arms around each other. Half those boys never made it back. The other half came back and couldn't live with what was left. So I did what I could. Eli stepped closer. "But no one knew. The government, the VA." Ray laughed quietly, shaking his head. "Government didn't care. Radio waves don't ask for permission." He flipped open the notebook on the desk. Inside, pages were filled with lines of careful handwriting, frequencies, call signs, fragments of voices written down like prayers. 3 a.m., Montana, says he hasn't slept since Fallujah. Pennsylvania, crying, says the rifle still smells like oil. Kansas, said he's holding the gun in his mouth while we talk. Kept him talking till sunrise. Ray's finger paused on that last line. "He didn't do it," he said softly. He called again a week later. Said the sun looked different that morning. Eli stared at the page, the words trembling slightly under his breath. You saved him." Ray shook his head. "No, he saved himself. I just gave him something to hold on to." The generator coughed once, then steadied. The static returned, gentle, constant. Eli felt the weight of the air down there, thick with history, grief, and quiet defiance. He looked at the man in front of him, this soldier who had buried himself alive just to keep others from doing the same. "Why not go public?" Eli asked. "Why not tell someone what you're doing? People would listen." Ray smiled, that faint, tired smile again. "The world doesn't listen until you're dead, son, and I wasn't ready to be a ghost yet." He turned the dial again. For a second, through the static, a faint voice flickered, distant, male, barely audible. "Anybody out there? Still listening?" Ray leaned toward the mic. His voice was steady, calm. "Always here, brother. Always." The static cracked, then went quiet again. Eli swallowed hard. You still get calls? Once in a while, Ray said. Mostly silence now. Most of them moved on. The rest, well, they find me when they need to. He looked up, his eyes clear for the first time since Eli had met him. But that's not why you're here, is it? Eli hesitated. I don't know. I just wanted to understand. You came for a story, Ray said, and you'll get one. But not for me. You'll find it in there. He pointed to a small wooden trunk under the desk. Eli knelt, pulling it open. Inside were letters, hundreds, maybe more, each in an envelope, neatly stacked, none of them sealed. He picked one up. The handwriting was clean, practiced. The letter read, Brother, I don't know your name, but I know the sound of your silence. I've heard it before. Keep your head above the dark. R.H. Eli looked up. You wrote all of these? Ray nodded once. Never mailed a single one. Why? Because they weren't for them, he said quietly. They were for me. For a long moment neither spoke. Only the low hum of the generator filled the air, steady and alive like a heartbeat deep underground. Eli felt something shift, not fear, not even awe, but respect, sharp and heavy. The man in front of him wasn't hiding from the world. He was holding it up quietly from underneath. A soldier who couldn't stop fighting, just changed his battlefield. He looked back at the wall of cards, at the names that would never make headlines, never get medals, just static and silence and one man's voice keeping them company. And for the first time since he'd arrived, Eli understood why the door had been buried so deep. Some things aren't meant to be found. They're meant to be heard. The next morning, the world above the cabin woke up. Birds, wind, sunlight cutting through wet branches. But down below, it could have been any year, any century. The air stayed the same, cool and quiet. Eli barely slept. He'd stretched out on the floor near the cot, the sound of the generator thrumming like a slow heartbeat through the walls. When he opened his eyes, Ray was already awake, sitting at the desk with a cigarette burning low between his fingers, reading one of the letters. Eli sat up, rubbing his eyes. You don't sleep much, do you? Ray chuckled softly. Sleep's for the ones who've made peace. I'm still working on it. Eli stood, stretching, the stiffness of the dirt floor pressing into his back. He looked around again, now able to take in the details he'd missed last night. There were maps pinned along one wall, outlines of the U.S., marked with tiny pins and thread lines connecting them to radio frequencies written in fading ink. Some threads had broken, dangling loose, as if the connections had simply gone quiet over the years. How many people did you talk to? Eli asked quietly. Ray didn't look up. Hundreds, maybe more. Some I only heard once. Some came back, night after night. I never kept count. Didn't seem right to. He set the letter down, stubbed the cigarette out in a tin can, and pushed the stack of papers toward Eli. You want to understand me? Read these. Eli hesitated, then took one from the top. The paper was yellowed but clean, the handwriting almost mechanical in its precision. April 12th, 1988. To whoever finds this, you're not broken. You're just carrying more weight than they can see. Sometimes the ground gives way and you go under. I did too. But down here, it's quiet enough to remember who you were before the noise. Keep your head above the dark. R.H. Eli turned the paper over, expecting an address or a name. Nothing, just a letter. He read another, dated 1999. I don't know what the doctors told you or what they gave you. Pills help the noise, but not the echoes. Those stay. I stopped trying to kill them and started listening to them. That's how I found the others. Maybe you'll hear them too, if you stay alive long enough." He swallowed hard. "You kept all of these?" Ray nodded. "Every time I couldn't reach someone on the air, I wrote them instead. Writing was like talking to the ones who didn't answer." Eli glanced at the sheer volume of envelopes, each one a conversation that never happened. "You ever send any?" "Never had an address," Ray said simply. Eli looked around the room, the shelves lined with empty coffee tins, the stove, the lanterns, the notebooks. It all made sense now. The man had built himself a fortress against silence, yet everything inside was made to speak. Ray poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one over. His hand shook slightly. "Funny thing about voices," he said. "They don't disappear. You think they do, but they just change frequency. You tune in, right? You can still hear the ones that matter." Eli looked at him. "You mean the men you talk to?" Ray gave a small smile. "Sometimes them, sometimes others." He tapped his temple. "Sometimes it's just me up here." They sat in silence for a long moment, the soft whir of the radio filling the space between them. Then Eli asked the question that had been sitting in his chest since he found the dog tags. "You ever talk about what happened over there, about Vietnam?" Ray's gaze dropped. For the first time, his face seemed older than his body could hold. "No," he said. "Talking doesn't change what's burned in. The war doesn't stop when you come home. It just trades uniforms." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small box. Inside were black and white photos, men in helmets, faces streaked with dirt, hands gripping rifles. Ray flipped through them slowly until he found one. "This was my unit," he said. "Delta Company, 25th Infantry, 70 to 72. He paused. "That one there. His name was Buck. Good kid. Could shoot the head off a rattlesnake from 50 yards. He called me Cap." He traced the edge of the photo with his thumb. "He didn't make it home." Eli leaned forward. "Is that why you stayed underground?" Ray looked at him, not angry, not defensive, just tired. When you come back and the world's still spinning, you start wondering if maybe it was you who died. Maybe this is what's left. Eli didn't know what to say. Ray lit another cigarette, the flame trembling slightly. "One night, back in 74, I turned the radio on just to hear a voice that wasn't mine. Static, mostly. Then this kid came through. Said he couldn't stop seeing faces. Said he was holding his dad's shotgun. I talked till dawn. He didn't pull the trigger. That's when I knew what this place was for." He looked at the radio, the glow of its dial warm in the dim light. "It's not a bunker. It's a lifeline." Eli's voice was low. "You ever hear from that first guy again?" Ray nodded once. "Every Christmas. Still sends me a card. Says he's teaching history now." Something in Eli's chest shifted. Not admiration, not pity. Something quieter. A kind of reverence. He looked at the wall again, at the cards, the dates, the names that stretched across nearly half a century. Every one of them was a life pulled back from the edge by a man the world forgot. "Ray," Eli said, "people need to know about this. What you've done, it matters." Ray smiled faintly. "Let them find their own way to the signal. I didn't build this for the living. I built it for the ones still trying to be." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, another storm gathering over the hills. The sound trembled through the walls like a warning. Ray stood slowly, wincing, holding the edge of the table. "Generator's been running low," he said. "Storm will kill the line if I don't fix it." Eli moved to help, but Ray shook his head. "You stay here, you read. If the power cuts, you light that lantern. Don't touch the dials." Eli nodded, watching as Ray pulled on his coat and climbed the ladder. The hatch clanged shut behind him. For a moment, the underground room was utterly still. Eli sat at the table, surrounded by the letters, the radio whispering softly. His hands trembled as he picked up another page, reading the familiar words written in that same careful script, "Keep your head above the dark." He didn't know it yet, but before the next dawn, those words would mean something very different. It was nearly dusk by the time the first drops began to fall again. Eli sat at the desk, the dim light from the lantern trembling over the letters spread across the table. Above him, he could hear faint thuds. Ray moving around on the surface, maybe checking the generator, maybe clearing debris from the vent pipe. Every now and then, the metallic echo of a hammer carried down through the ladder shaft. The rain thickened fast. Within minutes, the noise became a steady drumming above the metal hatch, muffled but insistent. Eli tried to read, but the air felt heavier now, thick with moisture and something else, expectation. He stood, stretched, and walked to the smaller room with the radios. The generator's hum was weaker, its rhythm uneven, like a tired heartbeat. He leaned over the control board. The glow from the dials was fading. Static filled the speaker, thin and cold. "Ray," he called up the ladder. "You need help with that?" No answer, only rain. Eli hesitated, then started climbing. When he reached the hatch, he pushed gently. It didn't move. He pressed harder. Still nothing. The door was heavy before, but now was like someone had laid the weight of the whole hill on top of it. "Ray," he shouted. "You up there?" Thunder rolled, deep and distant. Eli waited, listening. Then he heard it, a slow, deliberate knock on the metal from above. 3 times. A pause, then again. He froze, heart pounding. He tried the hatch again, grunting, shoulder against the cold steel. Still stuck. "Ray, if that's you, the door's jammed." Silence. And then another sound. This one closer. Not above, but somewhere behind him, inside the room. Eli turned, light trembling in his hand. A shape moved in the radio room, something pale in the dark, a figure standing half in shadow. The lantern's glow reached the edge of a man's arm, a shoulder, the glint of a badge. "Jesus," Eli gasped. Who the hell are you?" The figure stepped forward slowly, revealing a man in his late 60s, heavy set, wearing a soaked army jacket that didn't quite fit. His face was sharp, windburned, his eyes small and hard. "Didn't mean to scare you," the man said, his voice gravelly southern. "Door was open when I got here. You alone?" Eli's pulse slammed in his throat. No, there's someone else. The owner. He just went up top." The man looked around, taking in the shelves, the flag, the radio gear. "So it's true," he murmured. "He actually did it." "You know him?" Eli asked. "Used to." The stranger took a few more steps into the room, the floor creaking softly beneath his boots. "Ray Holloway," he said. "Thought he was long gone. Guess not." Eli tried to keep his voice steady. "Who are you?" The man hesitated. "Name's Jonas. We served together. 25th Infantry, same unit." He stopped by the desk, touching one of the letters with his fingertips. His hand trembled slightly. "He never stopped writing, huh?" Eli shook his head. "He said they weren't meant to be sent." Jonas gave a dry laugh. "That sounds like him." For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the rain above and the faint hiss from the radio. Jonas moved to the transmitter, eyes scanning the dials, the patched wires, the mess of connections that had somehow lasted decades. "I helped him build this," he said quietly, "back when he still came into town for parts. We thought it'd be a project, a hobby. But Ray, he turned it into a mission. He looked at Eli. You know what he's been doing down here all these years? Eli nodded slowly. Talking to veterans, people in trouble. Jonas nodded. Yeah, he used to call it night watch. Said somebody had to keep the light on for the ones who couldn't sleep. Eli studied him. Why are you here now? Jonas looked uneasy. Because I heard the storm hit this ridge, and because the last time I came by, 5 years ago, he told me if the ground ever gave way, I'd know where to find him. He glanced toward the ladder. You said he went up top? Yeah, about an hour ago. Jonas frowned. He shouldn't be up there in weather like this. Man's lungs can't take it anymore. Eli felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He said the generator was dying. Jonas's eyes darted toward the flickering lights. That thing goes out, he loses power to the radio and to his oxygen pump. Eli's breath caught. Oxygen pump? Jonas's jaw clenched. He didn't tell you? Eli shook his head, his voice faint. He said he came down here for peace. Jonas sighed. Yeah, peace and air that doesn't hurt to breathe. He started climbing the ladder. Stay here, I'll bring him down. But before he reached the hatch, the entire bunker shuddered. A deep, grinding tremor that rattled the shelves and sent dust raining from the ceiling. The lantern swayed, spilling shadows like liquid across the walls. Jonas froze. That's not thunder. The generator sputtered once, then went silent. The hum died, leaving a hole of silence so thick it roared in Eli's ears. Jonas pushed at the hatch. Ray! He yelled. Ray, answer me. No response, only rain hammering metal. Eli's chest felt tight. Is he? Jonas slammed his palm against the door. He's out there, and that hill's soaked through. If the mud slides again. The rest of his words drowned in the sound of something shifting above them. A deep crack, a groan, then a heavy, muffled thud. The lantern flickered violently, then went out. Eli stood frozen in the dark, his heart pounding in his throat, the air thick with the smell of wet earth and oil. Jonas's voice came low, calm but shaking. Grab the backup light, he's still out there. Eli fumbled in the dark until his fingers found the flashlight. He clicked it on, the narrow beam cutting through the dust-filled air. Jonas was already halfway up the ladder, pushing at the hatch again. Help me, he shouted. Eli climbed after him, pressing his shoulder against the cold metal. Together they pushed, the door groaning under the pressure of earth and water. And then, with a sudden crack, it gave way, just enough for air to rush in, cold and thick with rain. Jonas pulled himself up first, disappearing through the opening. Eli hesitated only a second before following. When he reached the surface, the night opened around him like a wound. Trees bent sideways in the wind, rain slicing through his face, mud sucking at his boots. The flashlight beam wavered, struggling against the storm. Ray! Jonas shouted into the wind. Where are you? No answer. Then, through the downpour, Eli saw it. The generator lying on its side, half buried in mud, and next to it, a figure sprawled in the dirt, unmoving. Jonas ran first, dropping to his knees beside the body. Eli followed, the rain washing the dirt from Ray Holloway's face. His eyes were closed, his chest still. Jonas pressed 2 fingers to his neck, waiting. Nothing. He tried again, harder this time. Come on, old man, Jonas muttered. Not like this. Eli knelt beside him, his flashlight trembling in his hand. Ray's skin was cold, lips pale blue. Jonas leaned down, whispering something too soft for Eli to hear. Then he looked up, water streaking down his face. He's gone, he said quietly. For a long moment, the storm swallowed every sound. But then, faint, impossible, a crackle came from below, through the open hatch, the radio, through the static, a voice, Ray's voice, thin but steady. Keep your head above the dark. For a long time, neither of them moved. Rain hit the metal hatch like applause for something cruel. The words still echoed in Eli's head, Ray's voice soft and certain, coming from below even though the body beside them was still and cold. Jonas sat back on his heels, staring down at his old friend. His breath came out ragged. He wired something, he muttered, left a transmission queued. Eli couldn't take his eyes off Ray's face. The rain-washed streaks of mud from the deep lines along his cheeks. The man looked peaceful now, more so than he had in life, like he'd finally gotten the quiet he'd spent half a century chasing. "What do we do?" Eli asked, his voice trembling. Jonas didn't answer. He just stood, wiping the rain from his eyes, and nodded toward the hatch. "Get him inside. He wouldn't want to be left up here like this." They carried Ray down the ladder together, his body lighter than Eli expected. The air underground was colder now, heavy with damp earth. When they reached the bottom, Jonas motioned toward the cot. "Lay him there." They did. The light from the backup lantern flickered against the walls, soft and golden, like candlelight at a vigil. Jonas pulled the wool blanket over Ray's chest, his hands steady, practiced. "Man didn't have family left," he said quietly. "Never married. His brother died in '84. Guess I'm the last one who knew him." Eli swallowed hard. He wasn't alone. Jonas looked up, tired eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" Eli gestured to the walls, the radios, the letters, the endless notes pinned like constellations. He talked to people every night. They might not have seen him, but they heard him. He wasn't alone. Jonas gave a small, broken laugh. "Yeah, maybe you're right." He walked to the radio desk and sat down, fingers tracing the worn controls. The equipment was old but still alive, the soft hum of electricity filling the room again. "Generator must have come back online," Jonas murmured. Eli frowned. "You think it's running on the battery backup?" Jonas didn't answer right away. He flicked a switch. Static filled the room, a low hiss that wrapped around them like breath. Then, from the speaker, a sound, Ray's voice again. "The thing about silence is it's not empty. It's just waiting for someone to listen." The words crackled, faded, then looped again. Jonas closed his eyes. He recorded this. "Why?" Eli asked. Jonas's voice was barely audible. "Because he knew it was coming." Eli sat down beside him, both of them listening to the voice replaying through the static. Ray's voice, but calmer, softer, the tone of someone who'd already made peace with the end. "If you're hearing this, I guess my watch is over. Don't be sad. I stayed long enough to see the world turn quiet again. Maybe that's enough." The recording paused, then continued. "There's a box under the table. Inside it are names. People I promised I'd listen to if they ever called again. If you find them, tell them I was still here. Tell them I stayed on the line." Jonas opened the drawer. Inside was a small wooden box with a list of names and call signs, each one neatly written in Ray's careful hand. He lifted it gently, like it was something sacred. Eli looked around, the silence between them thick as the dirt above their heads. "We should tell someone," he said. "The police, the VA, maybe the press. People should know what he did." Jonas shook his head slowly. "No, this wasn't meant for headlines. He saved lives," Eli argued. "He deserves to be remembered." Jonas sighed. He will be, just not the way you think. He turned the radio dial slightly. The static shifted, and for a moment another voice broke through, thin, distant male. Ray, that you, brother? Been a while. You still on the air? Jonas froze. Eli's eyes went wide. The voice crackled again, faint but real. It's quiet out here tonight, Ray. Feels wrong without you talking. You still there? Jonas leaned toward the microphone, his hand trembling. Yeah, he whispered. Yeah, he's still here. He pressed the transmit button, his voice rough. Night watch is still on the air. You're not alone, brother. The speaker crackled again. Then, slowly, another voice came through. A woman this time, older, soft. Copy that. Glad to hear it. I've been listening for years. Didn't think anyone else was. Eli's chest tightened. He watched Jonas steady himself, adjusting the mic. He's gone, Jonas said quietly into it. But we're still here. He'd want you to know that. Static filled the room again. Then one by one, faint voices began to rise out of it. Broken, scattered transmissions from across the country. This is Denver checking in. Seattle, loud and clear. I can hear you, brother. Always listening. Eli stood frozen, the air vibrating with ghosts and gratitude, the sound of dozens of unseen lives answering back. Jonas looked at him, tears glinting in the lantern light. You wanted people to know, kid? Now they do. They sat there for hours, not speaking, just listening. The silence wasn't silence anymore. It was filled with voices, with stories, with something alive. When the sun began to break through the storm above, the generator hummed stronger, steady again. The bunker felt different, less like a tomb, more like a cathedral. Ray Holloway had finally gone quiet, but his frequency lived on. The storm had passed by morning. Outside, the world above was washed clean, the ground slick with dew, branches heavy but still. Inside the underground cabin, however, nothing felt still. The air buzzed faintly with the ghost of static, the kind that never truly fades. Eli woke on the cot where Ray had once slept. The blanket still smelled of smoke and metal, like a soldier's tent. Jonas was already at the desk, hunched over the radio controls, muttering to himself as the faint green lights flickered across the panel. How long have you been up? Eli asked, his voice low. Jonas didn't look up, didn't sleep, neither did they. He gestured toward the speaker. The static was alive again, but beneath it, faint voices drifted in and out. Half words, pauses, then silence, then another. It was like being inside the ghost of a conversation. Who are they? Eli asked. Jonas leaned closer, adjusting a dial. People who used to listen, or maybe they still do. Hard to tell anymore. Some of these frequencies haven't been used since the 80s. Eli sat up. You think they know? Jonas gave a small nod. They know. Word travels fast in the dark. He handed Eli a set of old headphones, cracked at the edges. Here, listen for yourself. Eli slipped them on. For a moment, all he heard was static, a deep oceanic hum. Then, buried inside it, a man's voice. Ray, you hear me? You told me once to plant the tomatoes. I did. They're growing, brother. They're growing. Another voice followed, quieter, older. Still keep the radio on, even when I sleep. Makes the nights easier. Thank you, Ray. Eli took the headphones off, his eyes burning. How long has this been going on? Jonas sighed, rubbing his temples. Since before you were born, probably. He used to record every transmission. Said one day the silence would answer back. Looks like he was right. He flipped open the notebook Ray had left behind, the one labeled Night Watch Broadcast Log. The pages were filled with dates, times, snippets of words. but the last entry stopped Eli cold. June 9th, 2023. Incoming signal. Weak but clear. Voice unfamiliar. You'll have to take it from here, old friend. Jonas frowned. That wasn't me, he said quietly. Eli looked at him. Then who? Before Jonas could answer, the radio crackled again. Louder this time. A sharp burst of static filled the room. Then a clear, human voice cut through. Strong, deliberate, unmistakably alive. This is Night Watch calling. If you can hear me, you're not alone. The light's still on. Eli froze. It wasn't Ray's voice. It wasn't Jonas's either. It was younger, softer. He stared at Jonas, but Jonas just watched him in silence, eyes knowing. That's your voice, kid. Eli felt his stomach drop. What? No, that's impossible. I didn't. Jonas pointed to the microphone. The transmit light was red, live. Eli's hand trembled as he reached to switch it off, but Jonas stopped him. Leave it. The voice continued, steady, certain. This is Night Watch. The line's open. Keep your head above the dark. Eli's throat went dry. I didn't say that. How? Jonas looked at the radio like a man staring at something holy. Maybe you didn't, but the signal remembers. The static swelled again, wrapping around the words until they blended into something that sounded almost like a heartbeat. Eli stepped closer, speaking softly into the mic. If anyone's out there, you're not alone. I found him. He was real, and he was listening. He let go of the button. For a few seconds, there was only the hum of static. Then, one by one, replies began to drift in. Slow, scattered, raw. Copy that. Still here. Always listening. Night Watch lives. Jonas turned away, wiping his face. He'd like that, he said. Knew damn well someone would pick it up when he couldn't anymore. Eli looked at the notebook again. The thousands of entries stretching across decades. The room around him hummed with quiet life. Every frequency a heartbeat. Every crackle a memory. What happens now? Eli asked. Jonas smiled faintly. Now you keep the light on? The words hit Eli like a promise. He sat down in Ray's chair, adjusted the old headset, and turned the microphone toward him. The air was thick with warmth and electricity, like standing inside someone else's dream. He pressed the button. This is Night Watch, he said softly. You're not alone. We're still here. Outside, dawn broke over the hills, light sliding through the forest like water. The storm was gone, but a signal carried on, bouncing from tower to tower, from broken antenna to basement radio, across the quiet corners of the country where sleepless men and women waited for a voice that understood. And somewhere, deep in the static, faint but certain, another voice answered back, "Welcome home, kid." By the second night, the bunker no longer felt like a secret place. It felt like a heartbeat buried under the earth. The hum of the generator was softer now, uneven again, but it still breathed life into the room. Eli sat where Ray once had, the radio light painting his face in dull amber. Jonas had gone up to the truck for supplies. The old man needed air, space, and time to grieve in his own way. Eli stayed behind. He couldn't leave, not yet. The radio hissed quietly beside him. Every few minutes another voice would break through, most staying for only a few words before fading away. It felt like standing at the edge of an ocean, hearing whispers rise and fall with the tide. Still here, Night Watch. Got my coffee ready, brother. Thought I was the only one left. Eli answered each of them, not as a journalist, not as an intruder, but as a keeper of something sacred. This is Night Watch, he'd say, repeating Ray's words with a shaky kind of strength. You're not alone. The line's still open. At first, the responses came slow, scattered, but then more voices began to join. Some were distant, faint, others clear, almost too close. They came from deserts, from cities, from hospital rooms, a mosaic of pain and persistence stitched together by static. Then a voice broke through that didn't sound like the others. It wasn't tired or fragile. It was urgent. This is Connor, Army 101st. If anyone's out there, I can't do it anymore. I'm done. Eli froze. The voice was shaking. I tried, man. I really did. But it's quiet tonight. Too quiet. I can't sleep. I got my dad's gun right here. Eli's hand hovered over the mic. His mouth went dry. He glanced toward Ray's notebook. The logs, the messages, the words he left behind. He opened it to a random page. Written across it in Ray's clean, deliberate script were 5 words. Keep him talking. That's all. Eli pressed the button. Connor, this is Night Watch. I hear you. You're not alone. Tell me where you are. Silence. Just breathing. Doesn't matter, the man said after a moment. Place is empty anyway. Nobody'll notice. Eli's heart pounded. That's not true, Connor. I noticed. I'm here. You got a signal, right? That means you reach someone. That means you still want to be heard. I don't know, man. Every night I hear it, that damn hum, I can't get rid of it. Eli swallowed hard. You mean the ringing? The noise? Yeah, it's like it followed me home. Eli closed his eyes. You know what Ray used to call that? Who? Ray Holloway, the man who built this line. He said that sound isn't a curse. It's memory refusing to die. It's the part of you that stayed awake so someone else could go home. It's proof you made it out. There was a long pause. The static deepened. Ray's dead, isn't he? Eli hesitated. Yeah, but the watch isn't. And right now, you're on it with me. You made it through another night, soldier. Another pause. Then the faintest sound. Breathing. Steadier now. Copy that. Eli exhaled, trembling. Good. Stay with me a while longer. They talked for nearly an hour. Eli didn't ask questions. He just listened. About the guilt, the noise, the dark. Every so often he'd repeat the words that had anchored Ray for decades. You're not alone. I'm here. When the signal finally cut out, Eli sat in the silence for a long time, the hum of the generator trembling through his chest. He looked at the microphone, at the glowing dials, and whispered to the empty room, I hope you heard that, Ray. The light flickered once, and then the voice came again, but it wasn't Connor's. It was Ray's. You did good, kid. Eli's stomach turned cold. He spun to the recorder. Its playlight was off. The mic wasn't live. There was no transmission. The watch isn't about saving everyone, Ray's voice said softly, breaking through the static like a breath from another world. It's about listening long enough for someone to save themselves. The generator coughed, stuttered, then caught again. Eli stared at the radio, frozen. He wanted to believe it was a recording, maybe one Ray had left behind, but he couldn't find any entry marked with those words. Jonas returned an hour later, drenched but calm. He found Eli sitting at the desk, eyes fixed on the speaker, tears drying on his face. You look like you saw a ghost, Jonas said quietly. Eli smiled weakly. Maybe I did. Jonas stepped beside him, glancing at the microphone. You saved someone tonight, didn't you? Eli nodded. Yeah, I think so. Jonas put a hand on his shoulder. Then you get it now. This place, it was never about hiding from the world. It was about holding the line. Outside, thunder rolled far away, distant now. The hills were quiet again, and somewhere in the static, a faint signal kept pulsing, alive, steady, patient. Eli pressed the transmit button one last time that night. This is Night Watch, still here, still listening. Dozens of voices answered at once, overlapping through the static, some laughing, some crying, all alive. Copy that. Roger, brother. Night Watch forever. And for the first time, Eli understood that Ray Holloway hadn't died in that storm. He'd simply gone where all voices go, into the frequency that never fades. By the third night, the line had become something alive. The radio no longer sounded like static. It breathed. Every few minutes, voices rose and fell like tides, small bursts of life echoing through the dark. It was no longer one man speaking into the void. It was a chorus. Eli hadn't left the bunker in 2 days. Jonas came and went, bringing food, fuel, and silence. He didn't talk much, but when he did, his words were short and heavy. "Keep the generator balanced," he said one morning. "If it overheats, you'll lose power to the transmitter. And don't let the voices get too close. The radio's like a mirror. It shows you what you already carry." Eli didn't ask what that meant. He understood now. The bunker wasn't just a room, it was a reflection. Everyone who came here left a piece of themselves inside the frequency. That night, the air changed. Eli could feel it in his bones before he heard it. The generator's hum grew faint, like something holding its breath. The radio lights flickered once, twice. He leaned forward, adjusting the dial. The static trembled. Then, slowly, a voice emerged. "Eli." He froze. It was Ray. The voice was clear, unbroken, as if the man were sitting across from him again. "You're doing fine, son, but the power's dying. You can't keep it running forever." Eli's throat went dry. "Ray, don't talk. Just listen." The sound wasn't like a recording. It was live, breathing, natural, too real to be anything else. "When I built this place, I thought I was running from the world. I wasn't. I was tuning it out so I could hear what mattered. You did that too, didn't you? You came here because you were tired of the noise." Eli's hands shook. He wanted to deny it, but he couldn't. He whispered, "Yeah." "Good," Ray said softly, "because you can't carry silence until you know its weight." The radio popped, hissed, then steadied again. "I built the line to keep others alive, but every night I stayed here, I forgot something. The line needs to end somewhere. Otherwise it becomes a loop. A man can't live forever through static." Eli leaned forward, heart pounding. "Ray, what are you saying?" "I'm saying it's time to let it rest." The generator coughed behind him, the light dimming to a weak glow. Jonas's words echoed in his mind. "Don't let the voices get too close." Eli swallowed hard. "If I turn it off, all those people, the ones calling in, they'll be alone again." "No," Ray said gently. "They won't. They'll remember. That's what memory is. A signal that never stops bouncing around, waiting to be caught again." Static roared, sudden and loud. The entire console trembled as the frequency spiked, flooding the room with a rising hum that felt like pressure inside his chest. Eli grabbed the microphone, shouting over it, "Ray, tell me what to do." "You already know." The hum deepened, the walls shivering as dust fell from the ceiling. The bunker was groaning under the strain of its own heartbeat. Jonas burst through the hatch, soaked in rain and mud. "The generator's overheating," he shouted. "You've got to kill it." Eli hesitated, hand hovering over the master switch. "He's talking to me." Jonas grabbed him by the shoulders. "No, he's not. Not anymore. That's a recording. It's feedback, Eli. The radio's feeding on its own signal." But Eli shook his head. "You don't understand. He said it's time to let it rest. Jonas stared at him, eyes wide with something that looked like fear, or maybe faith. Then do it, he said quietly. Eli reached for the switch. The hum grew higher, sharper, turning into something like a scream. The voices on the radio overlapped. Hundreds of them now, calling names, whispering prayers, saying thank you, goodbye, I'm still here. And beneath it all, steady and clear, Ray's voice rose one last time. Night watch is over. The dark doesn't win unless you stop listening. Eli threw the switch. The lights died instantly. The generator gave one final shudder and fell silent. The hum stopped. The bunker plunged into absolute blackness. For the first time since he found the place, there was no sound, no static, no whisper, just silence, deep, complete, unbroken. Jonas's flashlight clicked on, weak but steady. Dust drifted in the beam like slow snow. You okay? Eli nodded slowly. His chest was shaking, his hands trembling, but his voice was calm. Yeah, I think so. They stood together in the quiet, listening to nothing. Jonas exhaled. He's gone now. For real this time. Eli looked at the dead radio, the silence pressing gently against his ears. No, he said softly. He's still here, just not on the air. They packed what they could before sunrise, the letters, the notebook, Ray's dog tags, and sealed the hatch behind them. The hill was still wet from the storm, but the air was clean. Birds were starting to sing again. As they walked back toward the truck, Jonas glanced over his shoulder. What are you gonna do now? Eli looked at the horizon, pale gold bleeding through the mist. Keep the light on, just somewhere else. Jonas nodded once. He'd like that. When they reached the road, Eli turned back one last time. The forest was silent, unmarked, ordinary. No sign of the door, no sign of the man who had once lived beneath it. But as the wind moved through the trees, for just a moment he thought he heard it again. Faint, distant, warm. You're not alone. And the air, impossibly, seemed to hum back. Copy that. 3 months later, summer settled over the hills like a soft blanket. The rains had passed, the riverbeds dried, and the forest had begun to swallow the scar left by the landslide. The hatch was gone now, buried beneath new growth, ferns, moss, wild grass. From the road, you'd never guess a man had once lived and died beneath that soil. Eli came back anyway. He parked by the tree line, the same old Toyota, dusted with gravel and pollen, and walked down the narrow path that no longer looked like a path. Every few steps, the smell of pine thickened, mixed with the faint sweetness of wild honeysuckle. He carried a box under one arm, Ray's box. Inside were the letters, still neatly stacked, each signed with the same 4 initials, RH. On top of them lay the dog tags, polished clean. At the clearing, he stopped. The ground where the bunker once opened was smooth now, the grass soft and green. For a moment, he thought of the sound of rain hitting that metal door, the smell of diesel and earth, the way Ray's voice had filled the dark. He knelt, placed the box in the grass, and dug a shallow hollow with his hands. It wasn't much, just deep enough for something to rest, not to be hidden. I don't think you'd want a headstone, he murmured. You built your own kind of monument. When the box was covered, he pressed his palm to the dirt. It was warm, alive. The world was quiet. Not the heavy kind of silence, the peaceful kind, the kind Ray had been chasing all his life. He sat there a while, then pulled a small handheld radio from his backpack. It was old, one of Ray's own transceivers, cleaned up and repaired. He turned the dial slowly until the static filled the air again, that soft, endless hiss. He pressed the transmit button. "This is Night Watch," he said quietly. "If you can hear me, you're not alone. You never were." He let go. For a few seconds, there was nothing but wind. Then, faint and distant, a voice came back. "Copy that." Eli smiled. "Good to know." He sat there for hours, listening. Sometimes he thought he heard other replies, snippets, echoes, but he didn't try to separate them anymore. It didn't matter whether they were real or just remnants of the signal bouncing through the static. The important thing was that it was still there. When the sun began to dip, he packed the radio away and stood. The forest glowed gold, the kind of light that made everything look like memory. He walked back toward the car, slow, steady. But before he reached it, something caught his eye. A small, square metal object half buried in the dirt. He crouched, brushing away the leaves. It was a nameplate. Rusted, thin, but still legible. Raymond L. Holloway, U.S. Army, 25th Infantry. Eli turned it over. On the back, engraved in the small, deliberate letters, were the words, "The light is never off." He held it in his hand for a long time, feeling the weight of it, not heavy, not sad, just true. Then he slipped it into his jacket pocket. As he started the car and drove away, the radio on the passenger seat crackled softly. Just static, just air. But then, through the hum, a single line whispered, so faint it could have been the wind, or maybe something more. "Good work, kid. You kept it going." Eli smiled through the quiet, eyes on the winding road ahead. "Copy that," he said under his breath. And with that, the story of Night Watch passed into the static, still alive, still moving, bouncing between the lonely and the lost, waiting for someone else to tune in. Because some frequencies never fade, and some voices never stop listening.